Most people don't run out of time, they waste it. And not in big dramatic ways, but in the little yeses to things that don't matter. Simplicity isn't lack, it's clarity. And when you finally choose what to carry, life stops feeling so heavy. See, simplicity, it's not only ideal, but it's required, imperative. It is oxygen to the beating heart that is your life. Without simplicity, we are blind. And when we're blind, we lose our grasp on that precious intentionality. And before we dive in, I want to start with the story of the Mexican fisherman. The reason being is because in its most basic form, it shines a spotlight on the power of intentionality, of identifying what matters, pointing that compass, and then removing everything else. It exemplifies a life of freedom. So we'll start with the businessman. Standing on a pier one day in a little coastal village, when a small boat with just one fisherman docks below. And inside that boat were several large fresh fish. The businessman sees this and he walks down. He compliments the fisherman on the quality of his fish and asks, "Hey, how long did that take you to catch those?" The fisherman replies, "Not very long." Businessman asks, "Well, why didn't you stay out longer and catch more?" The fisherman explained that he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" the businessman asks. The fisherman smiled and said, "Hey, I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take siestas with my wife, Maria. I stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my friends. I have a full and busy life." And the businessman kind of scoffed hearing that. He says, "Look, I have a Harvard MBA and I can help you. You should spend more time fishing. With the proceeds, what you can then do is buy a bigger boat. And then with the proceeds from that, you can buy several boats. And eventually you're going to have a fleet of fishing boats." And he goes on and on. Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you can sell directly to the processor. Eventually you could open your own cannery or packaging center. You could control the product, processing and distribution. You'd move to a bigger city and then a bigger city, eventually a central hub like New York and Paris where you're expanding your enterprise. The fisherman goes, "Okay, how long would all this take?" The businessman says, "About 15 to 20 years. "And then?" asked the fisherman. The businessman laughed. "Well, that's the best part. When the time is right, you would sell your company and you'd become very rich. You'd make millions." "Millions? Then what?" asked the fisherman. "Well, then you could retire. You could move to a small coastal village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siestas with your wife, spend your evenings drinking wine and playing guitar with your friends." The fisherman, still smiling, looked up and said, "Well, isn't that exactly what I'm doing already?" Now, the beauty of this story is that it's not hard to understand, right? We make our lives unnecessarily complex, forgetting or losing sight of what truly matters. The idea is not to let life slip by running a rat race that's, you're indifferent to, or playing someone else's game, overlooking the beauty and power of the present day, the moment. But that is impossible without having clarity, living with intentionality. When we understand what we want, we can then remove the things that we don't. It's that simple. If the fisherman in this story, this is the thought experiment, if the game of wealth generation was everything to him, if he loved it, if it lit him up and inspired him, then we have a very different story on our hands. If he wanted to go build an enterprise, then it's amazing. Take the businessman's advice and go get it, brother, right? Scale this thing. Trade some of that time with your friends and family for shaking hands and iterating your process and expanding your reach, but clearly that's not what he wants at all. That beautiful life that the businessman describes as obtainable later can be obtained now, if you're clear and intentional. So, the fun part. How can we be more intentional? How can we make things more exciting, invigorating, beautiful, and clear? How can we remove distraction and invite in the stuff that makes us want to jump out of bed in the morning? Well, we decide on our North Star and let go of the rest. We delve into purpose and say goodbye to the pointless routine and obligation, all of it. Swing by swing, we take our axe to the tree of unnecessary distraction and complexity. So here are some things we can and should let go of in order to obtain simplicity and intentionality in our lives, so that we, like the fisherman, can live lives conducive to what matters most. First, let's let go of the expectations of others. And I'm sure you immediately know what I mean. That idea you have in your head of what the world thinks you should be. Doing things because you think you're supposed to. So-and-so told me this is what success looks like. This will mean I'm important or valuable or interesting. Emerson said, in a world that is constantly trying to make you someone else, to be yourself is the greatest accomplishment. It's hard to stay the course, to trust your vision, to march to the beat of your own drum. That will always be true. But it becomes real, it becomes doable when you release the external pressure. What the world thinks is not your problem. Trust your ability to add value your way, to bring your own story to life. They don't understand, but again, them understanding is not your responsibility. And also, as sort of a subtle irony, they will understand someday. It's just that the road to someday has to be protected from the externalities and held dear. Next, let go of the things you do without a reason for doing them. Huh? Eddie, what do you mean? There's always a reason. Sure. Maybe I should put it this way. The things you do that don't impact the categories that matter to you most. Right? If you had to pick 2 or 3 things that meant everything, that were the most important, and then, before you went to bed at night, audited your day, thought about everything you did that day, between the people you talked to, messaged, places you went, content you consumed, food you ate, how much of that would point directly at those things that matter? How much of it could be directly connected to what's most important? See, I try incredibly hard to be intentional about this, and I'll tell you what, I'm amazed by how much stuff still sneaks onto my schedule that does nothing for me, directly or indirectly. I can't even imagine if I was operating blind or not thinking about this. So be intentional about what you do and how you spend your time. One of my favorite ideas on this topic comes from the book Boys in the Boat, about some college rowers. And the idea is simple. If something makes the boat go faster, they'll entertain it. If it doesn't, they will not, right? It brings them clarity. That simple dichotomy clears up everything. It positions the boat to succeed. It's always front and center, and that's how you should be with what matters to you. The next thing you should let go of is overconsumption of knowledge. And this one's kind of sneaky, because to learn is important, right? To learn is to grow, and to grow is to fully live. I'm not advocating for ignorance. I'm not suggesting don't read, don't learn, don't consume. There's nuance here. So follow me for a second. What I am suggesting is that we often allow overconsumption to take the place of action and learning through doing. I'm suggesting that the best way to change things, to make progress, to bend reality, is to step out into the world without the answers. It's to go. As I once heard Joe Polish say, you can't hire someone to do your push-ups for you. Sometimes there is no mentor, no book, no lesson that can give you as much value as life itself, as mistakes, as trial and error, attacking life. Just like water is critical to sustain life while simultaneously possessing the ability to drown you and end yours, a book, a YouTube video, a podcast can plant seeds in your head to grow towards a life of infinite possibility, but they can also become the steel cage that keeps you in one place, looking out at folks less educated, less prepared, and less equipped, building the world around you because they had the courage to attack it. And lastly, leave behind the illusion of fun, the excess partying to fill a void. You know, when I was a kid, angry in my kitchen that I couldn't go down the street and play with my friends at Kyle's house because of a family dinner, I was told, Eddie, right now you have a fear of missing out, but fun will always be there. If you want fun, there will never be trouble finding it or going back to it. Right? The people in the kitchen right now, you'll see as time goes by, they are what matters. And obviously I'm paraphrasing, but I never forgot the message. And it's been true. If I ever wanted to have a beer or watch a game, there is a 100% chance that I'd be able to figure that out, right? It's not challenging. But saying no to the partying and the beer and the girls and the distraction, try that. It's a lot harder, but simultaneously necessary to do anything significant in your life. If you can let go of the useless distraction when it's time to build, time to walk towards what matters most to you, you will experience freedom like you cannot believe. And so, what happens when you push all these things aside? When you strip life down to its simplest form, to its essentials? Well, you find yourself lighter. You find yourself able to climb that staircase with a little more ease, a little more pace. As you elevate, you become more free, more powerful. The sunset will be just a little more significant because it will feel like your sunset, as if God placed before you a little sign, a little piece of reassurance. It's the universe saying, hey, I know. There were so many off-ramps available to you. So many detours you could have taken. Plan B, C, D, and E. Yet here you are. You stayed true to yourself. You stayed committed. You didn't have to, but you did. And you should be proud of that. You should be proud of yourself because I sure am proud of you. In a world constantly trying to make you someone else, you didn't just stay yourself. You used your reflection. You used your power. You used your authenticity to set your soul and the souls of those around you ablaze. What's up? Welcome to the show. My name's Eddie Pinero, and super excited to dive into this segment because the topic specifically is one that's been transformative for me. You talk about impact. The art of cutting away has changed my life, and that's what this first segment, obviously hit on, the idea that we carry too much, and that if you can identify what matters and cut away the things that don't support that North Star or take you to that North Star, You live this beautiful life of simplicity and clarity and intentionality where your action supports your goal. Things make sense. There's less dissonance. You're more energized. You get out of bed with purpose. All because you didn't find something hidden around the corner, decipher some code. You just stopped doing the things that don't lift you up or bring any value. And I know that seems intuitive or obvious. I challenge you to audit your day, and really take a look at how much waste is there, because there's a ton. And removing that and finding clarity, I promise you, it's going to be night and day. So as we move into the second segment, it's the same idea of cutting away, removing excess. But this is a little bit more theoretical. This is cutting away the past, that version of you that you still carry around, even though it's not attached to who you want to be. Again, that North Star. I've always thought it's interesting, and this is anecdotal, right? But I do this, so I think about it. I'm aware of it. It's like we carry around this caricature of who we were yesterday and how people knew us. And we think we're indebted to the past. This is how I was. This is where I used to go. This is who I used to talk to. Yesterday I did A, B, and C. And so you think that you need to have some type of, or sort of continuation of that pattern, and you don't, right? There's a saying that the wake of the boat does not drive the boat. And it's an incredible message. We don't owe anything to our past. You can wake up a new person, put on a new pair of shoes, go new places, talk to new people, and live a new life. You just have to decide it so. And so that's what this segment is about. You are not your past. One of life's greatest lessons is that yesterday is only as powerful as we allow it to be. Yesterday is an idea, a story, a movie that started and ended. Now, it's quite possible that story or that ending is disappointing, or it hurts to look back on. Perhaps a reminder of something that wasn't ideal, something you want to break away from. So the question is, why do we give that old story power? Why do we relive it, create this self-inflicted wound? See, the past undoubtedly played a critical role. It brought you to where you are now. It, in many ways, shaped your worldview, constitutes your beliefs. It was the very road to this moment, and there's value in that. But imagine this scenario. Imagine stepping into your car, turning the keys, and thinking to yourself that you can, in this very moment, only drive down the roads you drove on yesterday. Only associate with the street signs you know, the places you've already gone. Your reality now is determined by what you've already done. So adjust and get used to it. You would say that's outrageous, right? Yesterday's path has nothing to do with where I'm going now. Just like a boat's wake trailing off behind it has nothing to do with where it's going next. The person holding the wheel controls that. We are saturated with freedom. There is so much opportunity and possibility and potential in front of us that we fail to see because we can't stop thinking about that fictitious story we call yesterday. We confuse the path we took then for the one we need now, the wake from the steering wheel, what is, and that story about what was. The gateway to change is unshackling ourselves from those imaginary monsters. And more often than not, the answer isn't in finding some solution, it's in cutting ties with those things that no longer serve us. Then we see the world as it truly is. Then we see the magic laid out before us. And I get that it's easier said than done. Leaving a part of us behind hurts. Looking in the mirror and being vulnerable enough to say, I can be more than this. It's not easy, but it's possible. And everything starts with how we see ourselves. And when we remain captives to the past, everything about who we think ourselves to be is outdated. We're neglecting one of our superpowers, the perpetual ability to restart. And one of the most important conversations I've ever had was on this topic. It seemed trivial at the time, but I was having lunch with a friend, and we're talking, and I mentioned to her that I was full. And she goes, well, then why are you still eating? And I'm like, because I paid for it, right? I wanted to get my money's worth. And she says in a very, pragmatic way, Eddie, just because you paid for it doesn't mean you need to eat it, right? It's a sunk cost. Why don't you move on? And the whole thing seems silly, right? It's like, yeah, if you're not hungry, don't eat. Move on. But in the grand scheme of things, how many of us keep on consuming that which doesn't serve us? How many of us stay too long when we should be letting go? We let the path behind us dictate the one before us. See, there's a tendency to overvalue what we know, to feel so invested in how things are, even when we're not happy or it's not healthy, that we'll take the pain of now over the potential for something greater. And that's precisely why the unknown is so terrifying. It's not concrete. It's a world unsettled. And man, do we hate being unsettled. But what we fail to realize is that every time we close our eyes, take a breath, and work up the courage to step into that unknown, to leave yesterday behind us, life gives us new pieces. It resets the stage. It provides new tools to build something incredible, something more ideal, more conducive to our goals, our hopes, and our dreams. And the thought is, well, but what if things become worse than they are right now? What if I move forward and I find myself more confused, more lost? What if things are more chaotic? And that may, for a moment, be true. But what we do is we adjust. We learn things we never knew. We see things through a lens that we never could. Touch things that we never thought existed. It wasn't in staying, but in leaving, that we rediscovered who we were meant to be. That we allowed our truest selves to flourish. And worst case scenario, contrary to popular belief, it's not that the world ends. No, the worst case scenario, should you find the courage to move forward, is that you end up right back where you started. A little more confident, a little bolder, and better prepared to live this life like you never had. All that's needed is for you to convince yourself that there is more. You just need to taste the fruit, step into the sunlight. That's the difference between reality and the story in your head. Reality is that this world has for you everything you need to change, to grow, explore, build a life that means something. It has the support structures and the resources for you to pull yourself back up every time you fall. To say, okay, that hurt, but now let's try a different angle. There is undoubtedly what you need. And the question is never whether the X on that treasure map exists. Trust me, it's there. The question is whether you can pause that story in your head. The tales of a dark, mean, and scary world trying to hold you down. Pause the idea that you're nothing more than the you of yesterday. You're nothing more than how people knew you to be. Pause the idea that you're nothing without that job title or that relationship. Pause the idea that you need him or her or them in your life. Every day you wake up, you are a blank canvas. Who cares about yesterday? What do you want to paint now? When you walk out your front door, where do you want to go now? Step outside that circle of familiarity. See how artificial and in some cases ridiculous these boundaries are that we place around ourselves. Life is an invitation, not a set of requirements. And when you free yourself of that, not only will you feel like someone new, not only will you experience life as it was meant to be experienced, but you'll see that this world will conform to your new definition. This world wants to support you. It wants to lift you up. And yeah, it may be challenging and strenuous. It may force you to work harder and be braver than you've ever been. But it is, at the end of the day, your ally. You just have to see your future self before it materializes, when no one else gets it. So move on from all that does not serve you. Break away from the old rules, regulations, and guidelines. Maybe you exhausted time and energy into creating this reality. Maybe it feels like a monumental piece of your identity. Maybe right now is the only security you have. Fine. But my hope is that you can respect it and walk away. See it as the sunken cost that it is. Just because you paid to get there doesn't mean you need to keep paying to make wrong decisions. Just because it took your time doesn't mean it's entitled to keep stealing your time. Just because it's part of your identity now doesn't mean it must be tomorrow. Just because it creates security doesn't mean it's right. Jails and steel bars are also incredibly secure. No, today, we are breaking free, leaving the past in the past and setting our sights on the horizon. Today is the end of yesterday and the beginning of the rest of your life. How beautiful is that? When you realize every time the sun comes up, it's an invitation to begin again totally anew. You are truly free. So the last segment here kind of brings everything full circle, right? The first two were about cutting away, whether it's your day-to-day activities or how you see yourself and the past version of you. This last segment talks about the art of bringing that to life, right? We tend to think of change as this big, scary, monumental thing. And the secret to change is understanding that it's one little decision that's most often right in the room with you. You don't need to do anything big or larger than life. You need to create momentum. Right? Using something at your disposal, whether it's, eating better or picking up the phone and making a call that you needed to make, or grabbing the running shoes that are in your closet, doing a 2 or 3 mile run. I mean, the examples are endless, but these things create momentum. They give you a win. They give you a W, and you start to identify as that, right? People follow through on who they believe themselves to be. If you're pushing yourself, challenging yourself, and rising to the occasion, you'll start to see yourself as that. That's pattern breaking. That's how things change. And it allows you to continue to move towards that new version of you and leave the old version behind, right? So this speech echoes that point, and it's called Everything You Need, You Have. I have long believed that the solution to even our biggest problems, right, our toughest tasks, our greatest challenges, they can be solved, or at least the process of solving them can begin exactly where you are, using only what you already have, right? Meaning the solution to your problem exists in the room with you an arm's length away. And you might hear that and think, dude, that's way too good to be true. That's too idealistic. It's too simple. But what I want to try and explain over the next few minutes is how the most important changes we make in life, the things that matter the most, they're simple. Incredibly simple. And it's only our tendency to make things unnecessarily complex that becomes the problem. One of my favorite thinkers, Thomas Sowell, once said, people who pride themselves on their complexity and deride others for being simplistic should realize that the truth is often not very complicated. What gets complex is evading the truth. And he's coming at this more societally from a political angle, but I think so many of these things in the big picture, in the macro, they make sense in the micro. Like I hear this and I think at a personal level, this is so true. You should see the things I come up with in my mind when I'm procrastinating or dragging my feet on something. This angle, that angle, what if this happens or that? Have I thought about A? What about B? What about C? And I usually dance around these things until I remember, Eddie, we've been here before. No. Turn the internal dialogue off and start. Go. Put the project into motion. Breathe life into the pursuit. Then it's off to the races. It's not that complicated. You go before you're ready and you adjust along the way. Right, that's one example. And a few weeks ago, this was sort of reinforced to me in a funny way. It's a seemingly trivial metaphor that I think in its simplicity can be truly valuable. So picture this, right? I was on a train in Venice, Italy, big family trip. And so we'd all been overseas for about 5 weeks, so we're not exactly traveling light. We have pretty big suitcases, the standard size you'd have to check if you were at an airport going onto an airplane. But we weren't on an airplane. We were on a train with tight quarters and big suitcases. Big crowds, right? So we board this train, people start piling into their seats. And, I'm like, okay, what do we do with these things? And I'm looking around, seeing if I could find a place to store them. I point to one of them and, one of the folks working there kind of just scowls and walks by. And it's like, okay, I get it. We're the Americans in Europe with the big suitcases. And it just becomes a circus, right? Now, there's an overhead compartment where you can put bags above the seats, but it looks small, looks tiny. My brother and I were peering around. We both see it, immediately go, no chance that's fitting. So I'm like, okay, we'll put the bags on our seats and either stand by them or sit on the suitcases, let the people board the train. And then when everyone's sitting, we can move all our bags to the aisle. And, we're solving this thing in real time. Then suddenly, I just get this jolt of, why not? Pick up one of the massive bags, and I just start jamming it into the overhead compartment. And, people all the way up and down the aisle are staring at me like I'm losing my mind. I'm trying to condense the suitcases, as much as I can. And after about 30 seconds, the thing somehow fits. My brother jumps up out of his seat. We start grabbing the bags and jamming them all in this overhead compartment. Now, I need you to trust me. I feel dumb as I sit here even speaking this. Imagine how dumb I felt in that moment, right? This whole little traffic jam and commotion was avoidable. Didn't even really want to rehash this. I just want to let it fade into history. But it's one of those things where it's like, the more you think about it, the more the seemingly obvious solution is the point. I'm drawing up a plan to sit on a 55-pound bag and all this unnecessary nonsense when the thing just fit where bags are supposed to go. And maybe it didn't seem like it at first, but regardless, the solution was right there in the overhead compartment. That's like dying of thirst right next to a lake. You're not too far from what you really needed there, pal. So now, let's take this to where it really matters, our personal lives. The things that weigh us down, the obstacles that feel big and ominous and intimidating. Resolving them must call for some larger-than-life response, right? There must be some 5,000-page answer book to encompass my solution here. Nah, not true. What's the simple, singular root of the issue, and how can you attack it head-on? There's an idea I've talked about before, but I want to bring up again, about the idea of little hinges. W. Clement Stone once said, little hinges swing big doors. Meaning, there's certain small things we do that have just this monumental impact. It's just, we aren't looking for them. We're not thinking about them the right way, as simple and obvious as it may seem. I'll give you a few personal examples. Headaches, talked about them before, I've battled with them plenty. They've almost completely disappeared from my life, knock on wood. If that was my suitcase scenario, right? I was doing everything but addressing the root cause. Ibuprofen every day, seeing doctors, different medicines, CAT scans, you name it. What helped? Electrolyte tablets. Right? It's like, I did everything but that. Sports injuries, right? Constantly dealing with stuff. And I still am to some extent, but stretching has made a monumental difference. Just waking up in the morning and stretching for 10 minutes. Or my writing output. Having a block of time in the morning where every day I write no matter what. Diet. Here's the magic solution. Don't have bad stuff in the cabinet. I'm looking at you, Flaming Hot Cheetos. These aren't of little consequence. They're decisions that have drastically changed my life. And I know they're right because I look at them now and it's like, it just feels so obvious. Oh, look at the rocket scientist over there. He started stretching more and now he doesn't pull his back every Thursday. But they only seem obvious in hindsight. When you're moving forward, they feel complex and messy and impossible. You know how difficult life feels when you can't open your eyes because of a headache? The last thing I was thinking was get some electrolyte tablets off Amazon. It was way bigger than that. It was, I hope whoever has to cut my head open and perform surgery knows what they're doing. Right? We think the solutions need to be as painful as the problem. No. The reason we're still there, stuck in the issue, is because we've put the problem on a pedestal. And I firmly believe that. And so my ask of you is to take a second and think about your life. Truly. Think about where you are and the so-called obstacles before you. And pretend you had to distill life down into its simplest form. If you had to, and I mean had to find a solution right now where you are, where would you start? If you had to do one thing today that would give you the biggest bang for your buck, what could that look like? Solutions are not as big as the problem. And I think that's why they're hidden in plain sight. I think that's why we walk right by them. We think we need a team of Harvard neurologists when we need electrolyte tablets. We're running around trying to camouflage 5 cases of luggage when they can be squeezed in the overhead department labeled, yeah, I know, luggage. Use what you have where you are, because where you are, answers live. And maybe it doesn't fix the problem overnight, but I promise you, it'll get you closer to a solution than the obstacle you've unknowingly transformed into a 7'8", 4-handed monster with razor-sharp teeth. You have this. you can slay this dragon and come out on top. Just one, believe it, and two, open your eyes. That combination seems to work miracles. Well, my friends, that concludes the episode. I hope it brought you a ton of value. If you enjoyed, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And in the comments, I'd love to know, on the theme or premise of cutting away, what's one thing that if you stopped doing or removed from your life would have a monumental impact, would really free you up to grow in a way that excites you? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.